Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue the chapter The Young Sanyasin, page number 85 for those who have the book. A full year of probation went by before Achyuta Preksha resolved to perform the initiation. The Shastras insist on a rigid probation of a year or more before a guru accepts a chela and establishes a tie of spiritual sonship. The guru is culpable if he admits any seeker into the holy order in a flippant spirit or a light-hearted frivolity and without suitable tests imposed during probation to ascertain the worth of the novitiate. To this rule, Vasudeva submitted without demur. Achyuta Preksha took 1 year to give sannyasa to young Vasudeva and he imposed suitable tests during the probation time to ascertain that he was worthy of that order of renunciation. Having sought the Guru at Udupi, Vasudeva had attached himself to the mutt and performed every kind of service to win his grace and benediction. When the Guru proceeded on his tours, Vasudeva accompanied his camp. He was patiently biding the time when his mother, who was instinate, should tide over the crisis and bless him Godspeed as mothers alone can do. At last, when the happy news of a younger brother ushered into the world removed all obstacles from his way, he approached the Guru to terminate the probation and accept him within the pale of holy brotherhood. It may be presumed that Ananteshwara temple put on a festive appearance on the auspicious day when Vasudeva made this entry. The eager crowd thronged at the entrance in order to occupy every inch of available space whence a view would be obtained. There was a flutter and a general consciousness that this was a memorable occasion. After he went and sought out the Guru at Udupi, Vasudeva decided to stay there only and he used to offer every kind of service that he could and he used to accompany the Guru wherever he went. He was waiting for his mother, who was expecting her second child, and as soon as that news came that his younger brother had been born, he approached the Guru and asked him to initiate him into the order of Holy Brotherhood. After that, the day arrived when he was supposed to get that auspicious entry into asceticism. At the Ananteshwara temple, everything was looking very festive, and there was a big crowd gathered there. Everyone felt that this was something to be remembered. It was a memorable occasion. The young ascetic parted with his silken tresses, donned the reddish robes of the sannyasin, and took up the knotted wand of the order. But the bald head and the rude garments hardly diminished or affected the glorious luster of his golden limbs and features. When he went around the shrine with his bowl and staff, entered the sanctum of Ananteshwara, and prostrated before the idol of Narayana, there was not a single eye which was not full of tears, nor was there a single throat not choked by emotion. Achyuta Preksha felt it the proudest moment of his life when he placed his hands on the glorious Vasudeva and blessed him in his new name of Purna Prajna. The good people of Udupi felt it the most solemn spectacle they had ever witnessed when they beheld the young ascetic pass through the function with touching earnestness of manner. On the whole, everyone regarded this as an epoch making event in the humble annals of Udupi. One is curious to know if Madhyageha was a spectator of this remarkable scene. Shriman Madhwa is silent on the point. The probabilities are that he stayed away at home, avoiding what would have been to him a heartrending spectacle. Who can say he was not right? The new name Purna Prajna was conferred on Vasudeva by Achyuta Preksha, and the Guru himself had felt that it was the proudest moment when he placed his hands on the glorious Vasudeva and blessed him. The people of Udupi also felt that this was the most solemn spectacle that they had ever witnessed. And it is sometimes when we think, did Madhya Geha attend this remarkable event or not? So it is Madhva Vijaya does not talk about anything related to this. The Rubicon was crossed at last. Sri Madhva turned a new page in his life and took to his new duties with enthusiasm. It took him hardly any time to master the routine of the new order and faithfully pass through the proper observances. All the boyish mischief of which he had been capable was gone at a sweep, and here he was, a veritable sage, sober and sedate, pursuing a career of study and meditation, and well nigh commencing his campaign of crusade against faulty systems of philosophy and religion. At last, Madhva had turned to the new phase of his life, which was asceticism, and he took to his duties with great enthusiasm. He was waiting for it, and whatever boyishness he had had before, all that subsided, and he was looking a sage, and he was also behaving like a sage only. He was very sedate, and he was always engaged in study and meditation. It was part of the old methods of education for kings to hold public assemblies from time to time, in which it was open to any person to display his learning. Every facility was offered to newcomers to carry on academical debates with the pundits gathered attached to the royal courts. The royal budget was usually liberal in the matter of rewards. Kings and chieftains vied with one another to excel in patronage of this kind. They took a special pride in being regarded as liberal patrons of learning. As soon as their education was finished, learned men travelled from one end of the country to another to attend these sabhas of royalty and make their mark. What took place in these sabhas was a kind of viva voce public examination, the successful candidates being rewarded with diplomas or monetary presents. During the time when Madhva was just initiated into asceticism, and later also, it was the norm that the royal courts used to host pundits who have just finished their learning to come forward and to display what is their specialty or what they have studied, and there would be the chance for the royal court chieftains to ask the questions and test the learning. And when they felt that the person in question was successful, they would be conferred with some kind of diploma or monetary presents. The example of royalty was imitated by noblemen and lesser personages also. It was recognized as a duty of wealth and of affluence to set apart a large fraction of funds towards an encouragement of Sanskrit scholarship. The aristocrats of old knew not of any luxury more legitimate than this, of no purpose having a better established claim on their purse. It is very heartening to see that that all the people who had wealth were ready to encourage the scholarship. So they used to also try to have such kind of sittings where they could help the um, students of Sanskrit to exhibit their scholarship and thereby obtain accolades for it. Every mutt or religious institution was patron of learning in a marked degree. The head of these corporations was usually himself a luminary or of renown. Around him he gathered other celebrities more or less renowned in some special study or other, such as logic, grammar, or mimamsa. Frequent sabhas were held to test the merit of distinguished visitors. No sanyasin of old could have got on for a day if he was not a pandit versed in the popular branches of study. Nor could he have commanded respect unless he did everything in his power to patronize learning and scholarship. So, those were the days when the religious institutions and mutts used to patronize learning. They used to conduct such group gatherings and debates, hold debates in logic, grammar, and mimamsa. And whenever there was a distinguished visitor, they would have the chance to test his merit. And in those days, the sannyasis were supposed to be well versed in all these subjects, and unless they were, they would not have commanded any respect. In these intellectual melees, it was the Nyaya and Vaisheshika system of logic that usually came in for the largest share of patronage. Gautama and Kannada, the founders of Indian logic have left works of undying reputation or syllogistic reasoning. Their works, together with commentaries, are the most authoritative treatises on the induction and deduction. Akin to the pedantic schoolmen of Europe, Tarkikas were veritable marvels of intellectual acrobatics. They were great lovers of abstract ideas, to express which they adopted a language of super subtle technicalities. The result was that those who could boast of Nyayika scholarships were invincible debaters in sabhas. It was this branch of knowledge alone that used to pay more than any other. They were generally able to silence and mystify any opponent by their verbiage and subtlety. The Nyaya and Vaisheshika systems were were the systems of logic, and they usually had the largest share of patronage. So, any kind of gathering where there were lots of debates going on, the scholars who were of this branch, they could silence the others by their verbal techniques and their subtle ideas, which they could substantiate through their logic. It chanced that a great celebrity known as Vasudeva passed through Udupi with a large retinue as an itinerant pandit. He could not ignore Achyuta Preksha's mutt, for the Guru was an eminent name in the world of letters. Vasudeva therefore naturally paid his respects at the mutt and expected that a sabha should be held in his honor, at which he might engage somebody in controversy. He had not, however, expected to find an opponent like our Purna Prajna to give him battle. So at that time, when Purna Prajna and Achyuta Preksha were living in Udupi, where at Achyuta Preksha Mutt, one Pandit by name Vasudeva was passing through Udupi, and since he knew about this Achyuta Preksha's Mutt and that it's here Achyuta Preksha, for being well versed in the world of letters, he decided to pay his respects there and also to engage somebody in debate. But he, of course, did not know, he was not aware of Purna Prajna's presence nor his mettle. Udupi and the neighborhood assembled in a huge gathering at a short notice. Sri Madhva and his guru took their seats like the president and vice president, as it were, of the assemblage. The memory the memorable disputation began with Vasudeva selecting some theme of his own and discussing it in all aspects. For 3 days, Vasudeva went on without intermission, marshalling a powerful array of arguments in support of the position he finally took up and maintained. At length, he concluded amidst the applause of the audience. Everyone wondered who would meet this giant and dare to assail his positions. Vasudeva took 3 days to establish his point. So that means he had lot of theory and lot of supportive arguments by which he could maintain his position. And finally, when he concluded it, the entire audience were stupefied at his brilliant discussions, what he had offered. And they were wondering who could tackle this kind of stalwart in debate. But what happened next? Purna Prajna took up the gauntlet and began to reply with equal ardor and great cogency. It was that he would sum up his adversary's points briefly so as to convince the audience that he had grasped the issues in dispute. He therefore reproduced Vasudeva's arguments almost verbatim and set forth his position lucidly before commencing his own attack. The audience listened with rapt attention, spellbound by the music of his splendid voice and the reverberating ring of his delivery. There was no hesitation or pause for words or thoughts. The flow was kept up like a magnificent stream. The manner and the matter of his eloquent speech was truly fascinating. It was the master's maiden entry into the arena of dialectical contest, and the debut was striking success. He got on like a veteran and succeeded in smashing all the arguments of the boastful opponent. The signal triumph won on this occasion elicited universal applause. They cheered him again and again and deemed him an acquisition to the ranks of learning. So Purna Prajna took up this debate, what was offered to him. Like he had been given one topic and he had been Vasudeva had explained that through many arguments and through a powerful array of arguments, he was substantiating his point. When it came as the turn of Purna Prajna to reply, he took up every part of the argument that he had put, every proposition and its argument, supporting argument. He was summarizing that first, and then he was giving back of what is the contradictory things that are in that, and um, how it can be understood in the right way. And his voice was musical, and his confidence in the voice was like a perfect way in which the people could understand that he was telling it with full conviction. There was no hesitation, there was no pause, there was no thinking, waiting for thinking and then saying. The flow was just like a magnificent stream. And his eloquence in speaking was totally fascinating to the people there. He was such a young boy, but his striking success was very much appreciated by all the people there. It was like it was his debut in any kind of debate, such debates, and there he had won, and the people cheered him again and again. It is to be remembered that in this disputation, not only was Vasudeva badly beaten, but several of his companion pundits who had tried hard to defend his position. A diploma of triumph was presumably passed to the young hero as a memorial of his first great triumph. We are told that this happened 40 days after Sri Madhwa's ordination. So it said that not only Vasudeva, that Pandit who had been visiting, was defeated, but all the other Pandits who were with him, who had come with him, they also were defeated by the quick logic and the intellect of Sri Madhva. And they said that this incident happened just 40 days after his ordination into asceticism. The marvelous feat of the young hero furnished to Achyuta Preksha an ocular proof of his pupil's attainments. He saw that Purna Prajna fully deserved the appellation bestowed on him and that he had an old head on young shoulders. He was convinced that the usual course of elementary lessons in the lowest rung of the ladder could well be dispensed with in this case and that serious studies might be commenced straight away. He perceived that Purna Prajna's acquaintance with grammar and logic were already masterly and felt nothing to be desired. He presumed, however, that the village schoolmaster of Dandatirtha would not have meddled with advanced studies of philosophy. Consequently, Achyuta Preksha told Sri Madhva that they better start with some Advaita treatise. The pupil obeyed the Guru's behest with cheerfulness. The work known as Ishta Siddhi was chosen for instruction. After looking at Purna Prajna's prowess in refuting the wrong arguments and logics that were provided by Vasudeva, Achyuta Preksha was quite sure that he had a good grounding in Sanskrit grammar and logic, and that he may not require any more teachings with respect to that. So then he decided that mostly he might not know much philosophy. So let us start with that, is what he had decided. So he took up the Advaita treatise called as Ishta Siddhi. After preliminaries were gone through, the first verse was read, and Achyuta Preksha expatiated on its beauties and explained the express and implied import of the stanza. The pupil listened with attention to the very end. When the lecture was over, Purna Prajna begged to leave to make a few observations. He said that there was numerous flaws in the text and enumerated as many as 32 mistakes and fallacies. He proved that it was hardly worth wasting time over such a poor and faulty treatise as Ishta Siddhi. The Guru was staggered by what he heard. His scholarship was not equal to the Herculean task of defending the ancient positions. Purna Prajna was such a close reasoner that there was no resisting the force of his logic. Intellectual honesty brought home the conviction that the fallacies and faults were there, such as could not be overthrown by any amount of hair splitting or quibbling. Thus, the pupil succeeded in sowing the first seeds of this great Protestantism. Protestantism. So we see that when the text was started and Achyuta Presha explained it, the whole, at least the first verse itself, Purna Prajna pointed out 32 mistakes. And he said that the text was not worth reading because there were numerous flaws in the text. The Guru was totally staggered by his arguments and his expressive method of proving what he wanted to say through reasoning and the force of logic. Achyuta Preksha had to agree. In his own mind, he knew that he could not combat or he could not support and try to substantiate that the Ishta Siddhi was right in all ways. So he had to agree to what the pupil was saying. After this, master and pupil were neither of them very enthusiastic over the progress of this particular study. Objections and difficulties cropped up at every step, and the course was seriously impeded by the inability of the teacher to meet them. Whenever Purna Prajna was not engaged with his guru or with the routines of worship and meditation, he devoted his time to Srimad Bhagavata. Some disciples used to recite this Purana in pursuance of a time honored usage by which a Puranic recitation had become an indispensable item of a sannyasin's daily engagements. Purna Prajna used to sit amongst 5 or 6 readers and compare the various readings with care and scrutiny. Amidst the material variations and divergencies, he used to pitch upon the correct reading and give excellent reasons for concluding that that alone was the author's version and no other. It looked as if intuition or previous knowledge guided his decision with unerring accuracy and without any exertion on his part. These critics subjected him to severe cross examination, but he invariably stood the test and satisfied them that his conclusion was impregnable. The result was that those editions which had contained interpolations and manipulations so as to mangle the original became purged of the errors and the pristine purity of the original passages came to be restored. Whenever Purna Prajna was not engaged in the teachings with his guru or listening to his guru or the routines of worship and meditation, he used to spend time on reading the Srimad Bhagavata as was the routine for the ascetics of that day. So during that time, he used to keep 5 or 6 people around him, and they used to have the different versions of the Bhagavatam. And every time the verses were read out, he used to point out the that wherever there were discrepancies in the reading, and he used to give the reasons for concluding which reading was right and why was it right, and why it was the actual import of Shri Vedavyasa, the composer of the text. Finally, they got a very good, pristine, pure Bhagavata for reading. Among the audience, it chanced that all were not equally convinced about the soundness of Purna Prajna's conclusions. Conservatism sometimes regard youth itself as a crime. Some people shook their heads, expressed their misgivings by saying that the young ascetic was far from competent to sit in judgment over the time honored manuscripts. They refused to assume or presume that he did in fact possess a mastery of the work. Purna Prajna was prepared for any test. One of the audience asked him to repeat the prose passages of the fifth skanda in the great work. This was evidently considered a crucial test to find out the depth of his knowledge. Since he was so young and he had not undertaken any real study of the Bhagavatam, as is usually done by the students, the people who were very conservative were not able to accept that he could sit in judgment of these texts and give the verbatim about which is the actual right reading of the text. So they were not ready to follow him, but they decided to give him one test. If he is really very good master of this text, then let him read the fifth skanda, because the fifth skanda was considered to be very difficult to read. They wanted to find out the depth of his knowledge. Without a moment's hesitation or delay, Purna Prajna reeled off passage after passage of the chapter in question with perfect accuracy. Nor did he resist until eager listeners begged his pardon and expressed perfect satisfaction. So what did he do? He just started telling it out, reeled off. It's not reading. He just started telling it out one by one, passage after passage in the fifth chapter of the fifth skanda of the Bhagavatam. The listeners, they were totally impressed and they were begging his pardon for having tested him. The puzzle that everybody tried to solve was how the prodigy of a boy had time to, or scope to master all that he seemed to know. He seemed to be familiar with logic, with grammar, with Vedas, and with Bhagavata. Unable to solve the riddle by their own guess, they asked him point blank how he had managed to acquire so much proficiency with so short a span of life. The reply was promptly given that the acquisition had been made in previous births. When all the people who saw his prowess in all the angas like the Vedas, then grammar, logic, and Bhagavata, they were really um, starstruck. They were wondering how did he manage to study all this at this young age. So they asked him, how did you manage so much of proficiency at such a young age? But at that time, Purna Pragya replied that what he had the knowledge, it was through the acquisition through many previous births. This one is inclined to believe is the true explanation of a genius. Talent is acquired experience, not necessarily from one's ancestry, but from one's own previous experience. It is conceivable that all the skill and knowledge gathered by the experience of a lifetime is not really lost on the dissolution of the mortal frame but sticks to the individual soul so that when he takes a rebirth, it serves as the nucleus of further acquisitions. This accounts for the great variety and diversity of intellectual and moral capabilities found among persons whose environments, opportunities, and other circumstances are otherwise equal. It would be a pity if Providence did not provide a law to conserve the energies of a human lifetime, but allowed them to run waste as soon as the physical encasement went to decay. Such a view is not in keeping with the ways of Providence, as may be inferred from other well known laws of nature. In the case of our hero, the accumulated experiences of the past were neither latent nor dim, but constituted a living memory ever fresh and ever lucid. So Acharya Padmanabha concludes this chapter on the young sannyasin by talking about his genius. He was trying to explain what is the meaning of a genius. He says the talent is acquired experience, not necessarily from one's ancestry, that is not just from the lineage where one is born, but one's own previous experiences. It is the blessing of providence that a person who acquires a certain skill in this lifetime through experience, he condenses the knowledge and stores it in his memory. Then it will come back to him when he is born again in another form and in another body. And it may be latent or it may be very well um, clear to him when he is born, depending on the experience or the imprint that has been put on the memory, depending on how strong that imprint is. Obviously, for this Madhwa, it was totally clear. The past experiences were not latent nor they were dim, but constitute a living memory. A living memory is something which is totally aware for him. He is aware of all that he has learned and he can use that knowledge at this young age in this form also. So it was ever fresh and lucid, his memory. And he also concludes that it is God's grace on the humanity that he provides the conservation of the skills and knowledge that has been um, garnered through experience by the soul in one form to carry forward into another form. So it gives us the impetus to study and to etch that knowledge into our memory so that we can carry it with us when we leave this mortal frame. Now we move on to the next chapter that we will continue in our next sitting. Thank you. Shri Krishna Arpanam.